Everybody, Invisiblekatana here with my review for Ahsoka Episode 4, Part 4, Fallen Jedi. Of course, with the ending, we're going to be jumping around, but all Vader stuff. So, got the Vader shirt, got the Vader helmet, which, don't have the top anymore because I gave it to my cousins and I was like, you know what? That was dumb. Give me that back. And that was like years later, so I don't know where the helmet is. But also, got my Darth Vader lightsaber. I have had this since the special editions came out, and obviously it's broken. A long time ago it broke, but I've had this since the special edition movies came out, and I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken, this was literally my very first lightsaber that I ever got based on Star Wars, because I don't think I had Obi-Wan's from back in the day. So this is my first ever lightsaber, obviously hilt only, but this is my Star Wars special edition lightsaber. Even still got the old batteries in there because they exploded and I cannot take them out anymore. So that's a part of the fixture now. I cannot get those batteries out of there. It is impossible, but I got it. I still got it. So great episode. My notes, once again, notes, because there's so much to talk about. There's little stuff, there's big stuff, there's rebel stuff, there's overall Star Wars stuff. So much in this episode. I know everybody's been happy. I'm curious if it'll bring back the people that have been like, oh, the show is super slow and this and that. Although when they did have the fight scene, I was like, people are gonna say this is slow too, and I'm like, it's the whole build up, this of the battle and stuff. But I'm like, people are gonna be like, this is super slow as well. But great episode, absolutely loved it. I'd say this one was probably 37 minutes in total. Like last week was 37 with the actual credits. This one I would say was about 37 minutes, not including the credits. So that's really good. But it was good. There's so much stuff. So we'll start right at the top. This is one of the last things I actually wrote, but we heard snips live action for the very first time from Hayden Christensen. And I didn't even hear it when I first watched the episode. I thought it was like too low. I couldn't tell that that's what he said. Of course, I was also freaking out because I was like, holy crap, it's the world between worlds. It looks quite different from Rebels, which is definitely something we're going to talk about, because this is the episode where I was like, oh man, I'm having a great time. But there's some stuff in here that either it's a reference to something, or it's like a really serious emotional beat. And it's like, I feel like people still might not exactly be okay with some of the stuff that happened. Or, it definitely won't hit nearly as hard for like the nerds like us, where it was like, he made this episode for us. We were there. He did that because it's like, these are for the people that have been with me since the beginning. It's like, we've been with you, Dave. We know. So this is definitely that episode where it was like, oh yeah, he did that for us. That was good. We got Snips live action. We got, oddly enough, we got de-aged Hayden Christensen, even though they didn't do that before for Obi-Wan, and he was supposed to be even younger then, and they decided to de-age him for his episode 3 counterpart. I just thought that was funny. So I was like, I prefer it personally, because especially then, I guess I don't know how I'd really feel if he didn't look exactly like if they didn't de-age him for this, because it's supposed to be the adult version, but it would still be like 20 years later. Like it's not like it was he was like 19 or whatever in the Obi-Wan show, like during those flashbacks, but it was only like a couple of years later. It's not like he, like the age difference. Oddly, now I think about it, probably would have fit with Star Wars anyway if you go with like any prequel series where it was like, man, Obi-Wan aged like crazy in those couple of years. So it probably could have been a funny inside joke anyway, but I prefer it being this way. Also, it's the last time that Ahsoka was with Anakin. I think, especially with it actually being Dave Filoni, he's like, hey, this is how it has to look, for the most part, to really have that like ultimate connection. And I'm sure they're going to be doing some stuff where either we're going to see new content, there's going to be Clone Wars, which, man, there's so much. It's in the notes. We'll just go through the notes. But first, snips. That was really good. So then we jump to Sabine's family died. And this actually leads right into the Rebels thing. For a lot of people, and some of you might even be watching this review, for a lot of people, they didn't see Rebels. It's the classic thing. But this was the episode where it was like, holy crap. And they do something good with it. And I'll definitely say this. The actual line they have Baylan give is that your family's dead. And that's like a holy crap moment for me and other Rebels fans, because for anyone who didn't watch Rebels, her family was alive last time we knew. So this is one of those things, like her being Ahsoka's apprentice, all that stuff, that's new. And then her family is just being like, yeah, your family's dead, is like, oh snap, I didn't know that. None of us knew that. So that's 100% brand new information that she really doesn't have actual blood family, because she had a brother and a mother and I think a sister, or maybe it was her dad that was still alive, but she had family. Like they had a whole, like, watch Rebels because it's all in there, and they literally, like, her whole storyline is real intense. And it would also kind of explain why she wasn't actually in The Mandalorian, because a lot of people were expecting that as well. But this kind of explains that, where it's like, oh, her family's dead, and she technically did some stuff, but it was only for like half the Mandalorians. Like, you know, the other Mandalorians that show up in The Mandalorian aren't like Bo-Katan, where it was like, okay, we heard your story, we understand how you feel. Those people weren't on Mandalore when Sabine was there, so she might still be an enemy because she did some stuff that allowed the Empire to like kill everybody on Mandalore. Like, that's how a lot of that happened, is actually because of Sabine. So there's a giant connection for you for anyone who did not know Rebels. Sabine is actually responsible for the Empire making, basically it was like an electrical conductor that could hone in on Beskar signals, and it would burn through the armor, and the people would literally be like melted inside the armor and turn to dust. And that was how the Empire actually wiped out the Mandalorians, because Sabine joined the Empire, and that's how all that went down. So random little stuff for you guys to understand how intense that moment is, to be like, oh, now her family's dead. She really has no reason to go back to Mandalore. So I thought that was interesting. Once again, that super hit for a Rebels fan, but for a lot of other people, they added an extra line that I thought was great, because then it works as for even if you didn't know Rebels, this line works, because right after Baylan says your parents died, the second half of that sentence is because your master didn't trust you. So I don't know what that means, but that one sentence that he threw out there was like, oh, that's why they walked away from each other, because she was probably ready to try to, you know, kind of whatever it was that she said. I think it was in the last episode, or no, it was the one before last. She was like, you know, I was hoping this situation would allow us to kind of advance my training, or, you know, speed it up a little bit. And I feel like it was that sort of situation in the past, and it was really like she's going to do it with or without Ahsoka's blessing, and she didn't get her blessing, and then that kind of ultimately led to her family dying. Is like, I could see that being the thing that split them up. I don't know if they'll actually talk about it, which they almost have to, because the next episode is perfect. If they just go with a Ahsoka Anakin thing, it could totally be like, okay, these were my hardships training you, you know, from Anakin's perspective, and then he could be helping her, because, excuse me, this is definitely, you know, if this was a normal like actual samurai story, and you can see it in like samurai anime and stuff too, this is the moment where like the hero gets knocked out, and then they end up washing up on like the shores. They go to like some random person's house for like 3 days or 3 episodes or whatever. And then they're like, okay, I'm back to normal. That person gives them some random advice. And then they're like, I can be better than I've been throughout the rest of the season. This is way better, because it allows us to see Anakin and probably some live action Clone Wars stuff, maybe even some live action Rebel stuff, which we kind of got as far as, you know, some of the references. So there's a lot of potential for what they're going to do with the World Between Worlds. So they could even explain the stuff with Sabine, and we could get a full on flashback, or it could just be done through dialogue so that they can run through even more things. But I think it makes perfect sense. It's like you introduce that in this, and then we see it from Ahsoka's side, where she's like, I knew she wasn't ready back then. Maybe she gets that now, but it still hurts. And why wouldn't it? It's her family. So maybe they'll talk about that, and I think that'll be very cool. But that was a great moment. I was like, holy crap, we did not know her family was dead. And then they say it's basically Ahsoka's fault for not really trusting you. And she didn't like keep, you know, like Baylan's reading her mind and stuff, and he's talking about like, you know, keeping promises and how Ahsoka didn't do that. So there must have been something. I assume that was that moment where all of that trust kind of broke down for them, and why they split up in the first place, before, you know, where we saw them in the beginning of this series. So I thought that was great. I feel like next week is the perfect opportunity. It was introduced to us this episode, and then Ahsoka gets to talk to Anakin about it, and he helps her through that, because that's probably the hardest thing that they've really done. And then of course, you know, she had her moment in this episode where she was like, holy crap, I trusted her, and then she failed, but then it was like, oh, she did it, and now she realizes, you know, maybe that was a mistake back then, maybe she was ready, but you know, well, I'm sure we'll get that, all that good stuff. But a lot of potential, tons of potential, but that was really good. We're going to a new galaxy. That's crazy. I always assumed Thrawn was going to come to us. I didn't think, especially in one episode, it was like, at the very least, we got the tease of going to the next galaxy. Like they shoot off, and then it's like they're gone, and then we see what happens with Ahsoka, and she wakes up in the World Between Worlds. So it's like, we know we're getting both, but they officially gave us the first glimpse of the World Between Worlds, and then it's like wherever they land, it's a new galaxy. I highly doubt it's going to be crazy where it's like, holy crap, you can tell it's new because it's Star Wars, so any alien planet is just going to be an alien planet. But the fact that we know that it's going to be a new galaxy, the characters will have to convey that excitement for us, where it's like, we know it's a new galaxy. But at the same time, for us, it's just another new galaxy. It'll just look like another alien world. But I'm sure they'll do some cool stuff with that. Maybe it'll be a bunch of Purgle running around. Maybe they'll straight up have, I know there's like the species in the comics and everyone's been talking about it. Like they could finally bring them in, because that's what they did in Legends, where like they were a species that was like basically way out in another galaxy. And then they come in and they become like the new big threat instead of the Empire, at least, you know, for a time. And obviously all that's Legends now, but maybe they could bring that in, and Thrawn doing his thing. He works with them a little bit. We get to see them come in, this and that. Boom, First Order somehow. But I'm excited. We're going to get that next week. Who knows? Maybe we won't. They could do a whole episode where it's just the world between worlds and we have to wait 2 weeks to see another galaxy, which once again, it's not like they're going to get there and boom, there's Thrawn and there's, you know, Ezra right next to him or something. So I think I'm okay waiting anyway, especially if we get some really cool live action flashbacks. It would 100% be worth the wait just to have the world between worlds give us all these different sequences, live action that we've seen before. And excuse me, I think it'll give a lot of great context for people who may not be as attached to the characters, for sure. And that leaves me right here. Sabine made the greatest mistake ever, because her giving over that ball was not the right move. I think Ezra, it was hard to say, because I was like, I feel like Ezra would have destroyed it, but at the same time, it was like, maybe not. Maybe with, you know, what happened with Kanan, maybe he wouldn't, I'm not sure. But she shouldn't have done it, and that was a bad move. But it leads us to another galaxy. So it's like, in the grand scheme of things, people might be like, oh, story-wise, she shouldn't have done that. But the consequences is got to be like one of the greatest consequences you could have in fiction, where it's like you go to another galaxy. It's like, she shouldn't have done it. Ultimately, that'll be a bad move because Thrawn's coming in. But at the same time, we get to go to another galaxy. It doesn't technically affect our lives. Greatest mistake ever, just saying. But I think next week, once again, if they do the flashbacks, even if it's from Ahsoka's perspective, we'll have a better understanding of Sabine's feelings and like how attached she is to Ezra. Maybe we'll actually see flashbacks, because of course there are quite a few moments where Ahsoka was with Ezra alone. They could even do I forgot what the heck they called it, but it was like the Star Wars shorts show that they had. Like the very first episode was a scene that literally could have easily fit right into Star Wars Rebels, and it was just Ahsoka talking to Ezra. They could just bring that in live action and be like, boom, here's the scene. This is a part of why Ezra is seen as such a special character and someone worth going after. This is why Sabine cares so much, and they could kind of hone in on the fact that they were the, you know, the youngest members of the team as well. They could play around with some of those factors. I think they'd have the time, and Dave Filoni is also directing the next episode. So 100%, whatever we get, there's going to be some explanations and some understandings of characters that even if you haven't seen all of Rebels and this and that, they might not explain, you know, 4 effing seasons worth of content and, you know, relationship dynamics. But I think they'll throw in some good stuff to be like, all right, here's why Ezra is so important to these people, and here's why Ahsoka is so driven, not just to stop Thrawn, but to try to do both, because there's going to be that thing where it's like, I want to help Sabine because this is what matters to her the most. And then especially if they go with the whole family thing, she might have regret for that. She already has regret for leaving Anakin. That was like a whole thing with the Clone Wars. So having regret for that, not being there for Sabine that got her parents killed, and then it's like, do I not be there for her again, even though I decided to come back and train her? A whole lot of emotional stuff that can really hit hard in the next episode. So I'm very excited for that. So we will see what ultimately ends up happening. But now we have to talk about a former theory, multiple former theories. Maybe he's Ezra, maybe he's Starkiller, maybe those are both stupid, and they were. Fortunately, Merrick, at least for now, is dead. Unfortunately, because of all the theories, I think a lot of people missed the fact that him being green smoke, and this is also once again another one of those like super, oddly enough, because it's so fast, it's kind of a deep cut reference thing, very much like Rebels, also in Clone Wars. That's Night Sister magic. So it's like, okay, they put like a Night Brother in there, like the spirit of this dude, so when he dies, that's why he turned to smoke. He was technically magic. So he could, you know, people have talked about this, I've seen, you know, a little bit on Twitter, people mention like he could technically come back if they're just like, all right, boom, here's another one, and there you go. Why an Inquisitor? That's very fascinating. I saw a couple people put like Ghost Darth Maul. I don't think that's the case. Personally speaking, I don't really think that's the case, especially, well, it's not like he'd have much of a choice, but at the same time, in order to get his spirit, they could say whatever they want. His spirit, she wouldn't have to be near his spirit, I guess, because I was gonna say in order to get his spirit, they'd have to like go to Tatooine, but I guess that's not necessarily the case. It's magic. It's pull a spirit from wherever, just the beyond. But I don't think that's really going to be the case. I think they would have hinted at that a little bit more. I think he's just going to be straight up Night Sister magic, and it's just going to be referenced like, hey, this is a crazy thing that can happen. This is one of those witch abilities. But at the same time, I just thought of this because I didn't think of it during the episode. Hati didn't know that Morgan Elsbeth was a Night Sister, but they've been with Merrick for quite a while. So I'm curious if that's going to come up for them, because she didn't even know she was a Night Sister in any regard. So how did she not know that that guy wasn't human at all? That I didn't think of that at all during the episode because I was more interested in them fighting. But now that makes me wonder, how did she not know that he was fake? And then that makes me question, did Baylan know that he was fake? That Marok was made of Night Sister magic? So it does make me curious. I would assume that he knew, and maybe he just kept it from her. But that would be interesting. It would also be interesting to see if they do actually go with that, because this was the first time they showed that minute hint of being like, okay, here is a guy who has honor, so to speak. He keeps his word for Ren, where it's like, I won't let you die if you just give me this. And then he kept his promise. And then Shin was like, all right, well, I'm going to choke her out as soon as she wakes up. And then he's like, stop it. And so obviously it's been established fairly well, I would say, that she's clearly, even though they're both in the middle, she's more towards Sith and he's still more towards Jedi because of all the training that he's had. Also, with said training, he's quite powerful. He does the Vader swings where it's like, obviously his whole thing was the Knight aesthetic. So we had the Samurai versus the Knight. That was absolutely amazing. And they show their different skills, and Ahsoka's trying to do her thing. She's trying to, she jumps off the thing and swings, and he just dodges it. It's like, okay, she's doing some jumping around, and she does like, no hand and cartwheel and stuff. And I was like, that's cool. That's really cool. And he's kind of doing the Vader thing where it's like, all right, I'm gonna be up here, and I'm gonna just do this real hard, and I'm gonna beat you. And that's what he does. Like, he basically beat her. She was doing she had like the different stances, which I love, where she's doing like the straightforward stance, and then she pulled out, I swear, when I saw it, the first thing I thought was like, that's the light stance from Jedi Outcast 2, because she did like the backwards thing where it's down, and I was like, when I see that's what I think of, because they had 3 stances in that game, and I was like, she did the light stance from Jedi Outcast 2. So that just made me laugh, even though it's an actual thing. But when I saw it with a lightsaber, I was just like, that's Jedi Outcast 2. That's the light style. That's what I like the most, because it's the most speed, and that's what she was doing. She was moving around a little bit, and then she did upside down for a little bit. I love the fact that they also did it where she actually fought with 1 lightsaber, and she chose to do it. It wasn't like she started with 2 and then switched because 1 fell out of her hand. They show like the variations of it. Like, she started with 2 when they were just fighting everybody in the forest, so she could just deflect really fast and like, be done with it. Also, quick note, Hu Yang had an actual, Rock'em Sock'em robot fight. I thought that was pretty cool. For half a second, I swear I was like, what if they do it where they pull like a pseudo Grievous moment, because he was doing the training stuff, but I was like, what if he actually holds lightsabers and just defends himself, like at least a little bit, maybe not full Grievous of course, but I was like, what if they do that? Sadly, it was just it was like a little hand-to-hand combat. So I got my hopes up like just a little bit, like they had extra lightsabers, he could just pop a couple out for extra defense, and that kind of would make a lot of sense. But sadly that didn't happen. But the fight, I thought, was short and sweet. I thought it was good. But they showed Ahsoka start off with both her lightsabers. Also, Sabine actually does have her blasters, because I think I mentioned that before. We hadn't seen her blasters like at all, because she never had them on, and they were always in her backpack. So they actually show the blasters. She's like loading them up and stuff. I guess whatever she put in was so that it was functioning, which I thought was interesting. I always find Star Wars guns interesting, because I'm like, so sometimes they overheat, sometimes they don't, sometimes they can actually like run out. I've seen that like a couple of times. It's super rare, but sometimes certain weapons can actually run out. And so I'm like, I guess I just need to look it up. But there's always different types of weapons. Sometimes, like I said, they just keep on keeping on. Sometimes they can overheat. Sometimes they can straight up run out. Like they just ran out of laser bullets. And it's just like, I don't know 100%, but she needs something to shoot them. And we got to see both blasters, and that was super cool. So we got to see her dual wield. We got to see her use her lightsaber. Ahsoka started off with 2 for defense, and then when she was going into like her battles, she was going one-on-one. It was like boom, full samurai stance, took down the Inquisitor or Marok super quick, which is very akin to the Tales of the Jedi thing, where it's like, okay, we're gonna have this cool battle, and then it's just like bam, full samurai style. Like she hit him with the anime slash. It was like he's like spinning around like, yeah, you don't know where I'm coming from, and she was just like boom, and then it was done. And it was like, and especially considering he was made of magic smoke, he was definitely done, and it was game over. And I was like, oh, I didn't know it was gonna end like that, but that was pretty cool. And now we smoke, so I didn't see that one coming, but that was cool. They need to touch on it, because like I said, I didn't think about the fact that her using that magic would be for a character that seemingly they knew before they met her. At the very least, Shin would have known Marok before she knew about Morgan Elsbeth. So I thought that was very interesting. Like, how long has Marok just been like a spirit? And like, it leads to so many questions, because like, well, how long has Shin been with Baylan, that somehow she doesn't know that this dude is made of magic? So it brought up a couple questions there, so hopefully we get some explanation on that. But that was super cool. Like I said, a lot of people skipped over it because they're like, oh man, that theory didn't happen, or people were tired of hearing their theories. But it's like, that thing that happened was really important. Granted, once again, this was a bit of a Rebels / Clone Wars moment. Like, what if if you watch those, that would have been like, holy crap. But for everyone else, it's just like, oh, he smoked, that's weird. Well, what the F is that about? So people have some questions. They got to give some answers for sure. Because you can't have a dude randomly turn to smoke, even if you're not a Star Wars fan. If you're just watching this because it was cool, you got to be like, how smoke people? Like, people just don't know. Like, you have to explain that one. So, not everybody's on Twitter. There are going to be people that are just like, that man was made of smoke, and then that's how he died. So they got to get some answers on that for sure. World Between Worlds, of course. And this is where I put like just a bunch of weird hopes and dreams. What if they do Ahsoka versus Vader? They did it in Clone Wars, or sorry, they did it in Rebels season 2. What if they show that live action? Like, maybe not even actually fighting, they just kind of show it just in live action. They suit them up and everything just to show that sequence. They'd have to build a whole set and all that stuff too, but at the same time, what if they did just because, just to show that stuff? Also, what if there's a Darth Maul reference, which apparently there was in the very first episode when Ahsoka was doing the little puzzle. I saw that recently. So I was like, what if they reference him? Because he's really important. He was in the finale of Clone Wars. He was the one that told Ahsoka, hey, sorry to tell you this, but I gotta go kill your master or everybody's screwed. And she's like, no, that's Anakin. I'm not gonna listen to you. You're Darth Maul. You can shut up. And then the whole galaxy was screwed. And it was like, whew, I thought I knew something and I didn't. So I think Darth Maul might get a reference. I would love it if they did. That would be super cool. Also, hey, Darth Maul live action, just saying, we could get it. Also, Plo Koon. Once again, if you don't watch the cartoons, you don't know all the extra deep nerdy stuff about Dave Filoni, who is writing this whole series. Plo Koon is his favorite Jedi, and Plo Koon is also the person that actually found Ahsoka when she was a baby, and he was the one that basically got her into becoming a Jedi. So he could easily get a reference where they kind of talk about that. I've heard some rumors where people believe that Baylan may have been a student of Plo Koon, which I think would definitely be cool. One of those, poetry rhymes type deals, because there's already some stuff going on with this as is, where it's like, this stuff is going full circle. The stuff with Sabine, I'm still 100% on she's going to be a sensory type, which would circle back to Rebels and circle back to Kanan. And he was the first Jedi to ever teach her anything. And so it just, once again, poetry, rhyming, all that good stuff. And Dave Filoni was responsible for Rebels, is almost like the perfect connection, so that they have even more stuff to talk about where it comes to like circling back and be like, oh, Kanan did this and Kanan did that. It just fits. It all goes in there. But Plo Koon, possible reference. And then outside of all that, all the possible references, I would love to see live action clones again. They obviously already made the suit. We saw that in Obi-Wan. They could just get a dude. I highly, highly doubt we should ever expect to see it or hope to see it. But if they went super duper crazy and they were like, hey, what if for like 10 seconds live action, we just show like a random thing in the World Between Worlds? It's like, hey, remember this with Rex? And we get to see Ahsoka, Anakin, and Rex in live action. Highly doubt it. But at the same time, it would be nice. So we'll see what happens there. I don't know. But once again, just being a little hopeful. I thought I wrote 2 things in notes. Maybe I only wrote the 1. I guess that was it. That's good. Fantastic episode. I don't see how anyone could just not like this one. It was fantastic in like every conceivable way as far as I'm concerned. I love the battles. I loved Shin had like crazy smoke bombs. I thought that was hilarious when things started to go wrong and she had to take off to help Baylan. She hit Sabine with the smoke bombs. I was like, oh, she put her own little ninja move. That caught me off guard. I was surprised by that. But Sabine did do an itty bitty mini force push. She was like Dan from Street Fighter was like just like it technically happened, but it was like it's not, you got to be extra skilled to use like that little power. So that was interesting. Shin's face even like actually turned, like you see your hair pushing. It was like, oh, okay, like you got a little push, and then it shocked her, but it was like, oh, you got nothing. Like you got nothing. But she did do it, and I thought that was cool. I'm still going with the sensory type thing. I don't think that. I mean, at the very least, they might make it like the slightest push where it would literally be like kind of tripping somebody and nothing like really powerful. But I think sensory type would make the most sense personally, because she doesn't really, especially being a Mandalorian, she does not need to have force push or force pull to be strong, because the whole thing is like, well, she's already strong. She's a Mandalorian. They do the sequence, you know, her getting shot with the Beskar and everything like that, and how they work together, which also I swear, when Sabine was being shot and she was like blocking with the wrist full, you know, Wonder Woman style, when Ahsoka turned and saw the dude, first off, she had a dude impaled on one lightsaber, which I was like, that's pretty sick. But I swear to God, she was like this and literally used her pinky to like push the other person. I was like, that was her pinky, right? Like, unless I'm crazy, it was in the middle of action, but I swear I thought she just did this and just threw the guy in front of him. And I was like, did she just use her pinky? Like, it was so disrespectful. I could be wrong, but I'm like, I swear she just lifted her pinky up for like focus. I was like, right with her pinky, and it's just like, okay, she did it. She did a force pinky push. So that was crazy. I thought that was funny, unless I saw that wrong, but in my head that's what I saw, and that was definitely entertaining. So I loved all of that. Like I said, all the different fight styles, both sabers, single saber, a lot of single saber. Would love to have seen more of the upside down stance, but we got to see multiple, so I was definitely happy with that. She did fall over the cliff, and as I was watching, I was like, there's no way they're gonna do this, because it's the thing, you know, the hero has to like go back because they got beat by, you know, one of the villains that's just a little bit more powerful, and then they have to go away and train and do all that for like a couple episodes and then come back, and now she's training with Anakin one last time. So I think that's really cool. I'm very excited for next week's episode. Sabine's battle, and I don't know if I mentioned this, but I was like, this is how it's gonna go. Sabine is gonna lose, then they're gonna somehow have a draw, and then Sabine has to win in the third fight. That's how it goes. This is their draw, where it was like, okay, back and forth, and you know, probably would have lost that, considering the fact that she was on the ground. But at the same time, after she failed the force push, she was like, okay, Mandalorian mode, and she just shot, and you know, she hit Shin's lightsaber right out of her hand, and it was like, okay. So, and I thought that's where it was gonna go. I thought it was gonna be a longer fight, which I was really hoping for, because I was like, oh, this is gonna be where she gets like an actual upper hand, but it's, you know, it was still cut off in some way. Sadly, we don't actually get to see that, but I assume that in the final battle, when they do eventually, you know, cross paths again in a, you know, more negative sense, I think that's when she'll fully have everything together. And I think, like I said, they're going to go with the sensory type move and less so actual force push and force pull offense. It'll be more for defense, so that she can utilize her natural Mandalorian skills better for offense. So I think that's how they're going to perfectly do it. Her use of the force is just going to be reading the force. And I think that's something that they kind of showed with Shin, where, and they don't have a lot of sequences with this just yet. It's, you know, it's only been a couple episodes and they haven't really faced off, but Shin doesn't really deflect blasters like that, and she definitely didn't do it in this episode. I think she did it maybe one time, and it was just to like defend herself, but she doesn't do like the precision thing where it's like boom and I just block it right back at you. Any other person that was like insanely powerful would have just been like boom boom and just blocked it. They would have just been blocking it back and instantly been on the attack, but she's not strong enough to do that, where she can actually manipulate it, as far as, you know, Sabine dual wielding at her at least. And I was like, that's interesting. Like, she's on the run and she's, you know, dodging or deflecting it, but not once was it used to like deflect back at Sabine. It was just to kind of save her butt as she was running to a different spot in the battle. And I was like, oh, that's interesting, because that's like the go-to move. It's like, the last thing you can do is draw on a Jedi, because they'll do like boom, and, you know, it's like, what are you doing? So the fact that they did that, you know, could just be random, but for me, I was like, I definitely took note of that, because that seems that it comes off as one of the simpler things that characters do, but she's still a Padawan, so she's still learning to get even more in tune with the force. And I was like, oh, that's pretty interesting, because that's, you know, that's when with the characters we see, that's nothing. That's like low level type stuff, and it's just like, yeah, I can block all this all day. You know, there's literally buttons for it in the Jedi Fallen Order game, and it's just like you just hold it and it's just, you just run through and just like I can deflect whatever I want. And she's not at that level yet, so I think that's really cool where they show some of these minute things. Like I said, this might just be me reaching because I'm such a giant Star Wars nerd that that's so normal to see, just, you know, deflecting it back, especially if you watch however many years worth of Clone Wars and then of course going into Rebels. All use, like 90% of Star Wars at this point for me has to be Jedi just going like boom and just deflecting blaster bolts, you know? So it was definitely interesting to see her run and never actually use that as both an attack and or really a counterattack would be the best way to put it. So she doesn't really do that, and I thought that was really interesting. So I was like, okay, something I noticed where it was like one of her shortcomings of not really being able to read the Force as well as she thinks she can. And I think that's also why their battles are more intense, because we saw both sides of like Star Wars like Jedi combat, and I thought that was great, or at the very least lightsaber combat. And I don't think we've ever had that before in anything Star Wars, honestly. Like, you have one or the other, but I don't think there's ever been a moment in live action or animated, if I'm being completely honest, that I can think of where it's like, here's both halves of the Force at very different levels. You have Ahsoka and Baylan with the way that they do like the classic samurai battle where they're like, pacing each other out and going around the battlefield and all that stuff. And then you have both their Padawans, one of which is barely even remotely close to the Force, like in any regard. And then you see how they fight, and it's like you have this slow battle where they're like reading each other's moves, like it's like playing chess or something before they even take their first couple of moves. And then you have the Padawans who are just like, I gotta run in and I gotta chop your effing head off because I gotta get that out of here. Like that's how they both act. And obviously one being closer to the Force, Shin is a bit more calm when it comes to the situation, but she was definitely like, they were fighting in this one. Like for sure she was playing a lot more in the first one. And it was like, okay, it's like maybe like 10-15% of that very first battle was like, all right, Sabine's doing pretty good, she's at the very least defending. And then it was a real back and forth, including utilizing some of her Mandalorian stuff. So I thought that was really cool. I am very excited for however they end up fighting, in their final battle, but I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to next episode. I think it's going to be like one of the best things ever, and I've been having a great time. I mentioned this, I think, in the first or second episode. First off, I've loved the show from day one, but man, as one of the people that actually love Mandalorian season 3, I'm having a fantastic time. This is all the stuff that I always wanted to see, and this I just really enjoy because they're doing more. I think I like it more because I already like Ahsoka. I like Sabine mostly because of Mandalorian stuff, but the samurai style is a really big part of it for me. It's not just the story, it is literally just the feeling of the show, having the way they do the music when they do the introduction. Like those elements are found in samurai movies and Japanese music when it's done like that. I was like, okay, it's not just the characters in the story, it really is the style that's really doing it for me. And I've always loved Ahsoka, and it's always, whenever Ahsoka's involved, it tends to be pretty deep. And now they're getting to not just like, oh, this is cool stuff for Star Wars, they're doing another thing that I feel like we rarely ever see, and that's like the super deep emotional stuff. And you can't get it with 100 million characters, you can't do it too often. And Dave Filoni was like, all right, I'm gonna take this little bit of time here and I'm gonna hit this emotional beat, and I think it's gonna be really fun, especially if you're super heavily involved in Star Wars. I think it'll be good no matter what, and I think I said that a couple episodes back, like they have some potential here to do some really hard-hitting stuff, considering everything that's going on with Ahsoka, and especially where she is as far as being the apprentice of Vader and now trying to be the new master of someone else that she already failed before, or they kind of failed each other, and then getting back into that and everything that's happened, including the new introduction of Sabine's family dying. There's a lot to talk about there, and there's a lot of good emotional stuff they can show, a lot of epic flashbacks they can pull off. There's so many things. Like they might just surprise us and be like, here's like I said, they might do Rex, they could be like, here's another cameo, and you thought we were stopping at Hayden Christensen. They could do it if they wanted to do it, so that's good. I'm trying to be hopeful, and whatever we get, I'm sure I'll love, but I'm trying to get my hopes like too high as far as what we may or may not see. I think Maul at least getting a reference would be pretty easy. I think it'll be pretty easy for them to at the very least be like, I mean, he's the person that would make Ahsoka be like, I didn't listen to Maul for obvious reasons, but in that one situation, he could have helped me stop you from turning to the dark side. Maybe we would have had to have teamed up to kill him so he doesn't kill you, but we could have talked about it and figured some stuff out. So I feel like Maul almost has to have a reference. It would be crazy if he didn't. But all in all, this was a great episode. I love the multiple lightsaber battles that we got to see. I am very curious what they're going to do with this new galaxy. I'm very curious what we're going to do with the world between worlds, which is very blue. I don't know if I mentioned in the beginning, but it's very blue, not so stark black and white like it was in Rebels. Not, none of the doorways and stuff. It was mostly just the paths, but it was great. I was definitely excited. I love the ending. Obviously, I wish we had like the next episode right now. Just give us like a full hour-long episode. I think we'll be good. Whatever we get, It's gonna be crazy. That I know, because obviously Filoni wrote everything. But the fact that he's like, all right, I'm gonna direct this one that I also wrote. Whenever he's the one that's doing it, it's just like with Ahsoka. It's like when he's directing it, he got something going. So it's about to be great. Like some visuals or some scenes, he's like, I'm going to be here every step of the way because we're about to film some of the craziest stuff ever. So next week, and I don't think it's crazy to hype this up, and this is from someone who's like seen all the stuff he's done. If you only watch the live action stuff, some of which was The Mandalorian, like probably some of the better parts of Mandalorian, I would say like it was probably, it's Dave Filoni, if we're being completely honest. For anyone who doesn't know that, it's Dave Filoni. I know Jon Favreau is way more famous, but it's Dave Filoni. I promise you it's Dave Filoni. So him directing it means he got something coming. Something crazy is about to happen next week, and I'm very excited for that. So great time for Star Wars. This is good. I was already happy first couple of episodes. I never thought it was slow, but this is the one. This is the crazy one. And then we got something even crazier for sure coming next week. So very excited for that. We'll love to know your thoughts on this episode. Thoughts, theories, everything, like with the way it happened. Sabine now being with the villains. A lot of people mentioned the fact that they do the light and dark side thing, and Sabine's face was like red in this episode, but Marek's was blue in this episode, but I think it was for like the past couple as well. And so that was a part of, some of the running theories, like, well, what does this mean and what does that mean? So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens going forward. We'll see if they just straight up find Ezra, or they'll have to at least reference him, because Thrawn will be like, he's somewhere in here somewhere. So curious how that's gonna go, but we might end up waiting 2 weeks because, excuse me, it might really just be like a straight up Ahsoka Anakin episode. And I think the execution for it, even if people are like, we got to get to the other galaxy to see what's happening, I think when the execution hits, I don't think anyone would have a problem. If that, is even what ends up happening, where it's like just Ahsoka and Anakin going through stuff, maybe a couple cameos here and there. But if that is how it goes, it'll be great. Whatever it's going to be, I'm almost like 100% confident in being like, he's not going to let it slip. Especially the one he's directing. I don't know. Something's about to happen. That's all I can say. But we'd love to know what you guys thought about this episode. Thoughts, theories, hopes, dreams, and all that good stuff going forward for the next couple of episodes. So please put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.
You hungry? I'm hungry. I'm hungry. I'm hungry. You hungry? Yeah, I'm hungry. Like I'm hungry. I'm hungry. Like I'm Shaggy. Man, I'm hungry. Man, I'm hungry. I'm hungry. Yeah, man. You hungry?